Besides the image of the waters that flows from this under the throne of God, Ezekiel has many other wonderful images as well, and I want to start this video with a description of the true shepherd from chapter 34. For thus says the Lord, behold, I shall search for my sheep and care for them. As a shepherd seeks his flock on a day when there is darkness, and when a cloud separates the sheep, thus will I drive them from every place where they were scattered in the day of cloud and darkness. And I shall bring them out of the Gentiles, gather them from the countries, and bring them back into the land. I shall seek the lost, bring back the misled, bind up the broken, strengthen the fallen, protect the young, and feed them with judgment. In the beginning, God made heaven and earth. The earth was invisible and unfinished, and darkness was over the deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things are made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. We two-legged folk, we men, spend a lot of time trying to get the words right, and nowhere was this more evident than in the Protestant Reformation. Marshall McLuhan famously has said that the printing press made the Reformation. Not only made it, sort of made it necessary almost. I mean, it was an unavoidable consequence. Because with the coming of the printing press, we thought that we could present to the world just the right words, and these right words would create just the right world, and the world would be good as we had created it. Well, nowhere has this been more successful, I think, than in the Book of Common Prayer of the English Church, the Church of England. And it hedged its bets, because one would think that just saying the words would be enough, but there was also bound up in the same book the 39 articles, sometimes a few more, sometimes a few less, explaining what those words meant, just in case you had any doubts. And it was illegal to continue in the old religion, the Catholicism that preceded the proclamation that the king was the head of the church rather than the bishops, or even more dangerous perhaps to the king, the abbots, until 1829, when finally Catholics were liberated in England, and it would be legal once more to say the words that had come before the Book of Common Prayer. And it is no small coincidence that with the Catholic Emancipation Act came also the rise of Anglo-Catholicism in the Church of England. Now, you know, there have been kind of closet Anglo-Catholics before. Think of the little Gideon community. But all of a sudden, there was an outburst of what I'm going to call retrieval, because when I asked some of my friends who are part of the current retrieval movement, which I was thinking of calling, reclaiming the wells, redigging the wells, they said, well, it's retrieval. And so people like John Mason Neal retrieved the ancient hymns of the church and published the Greek and Latin hymns. The Tractarians would try to interpret the 39 articles in ways that made it seem that they weren't really Protestant at all. The perhaps more strictly rational folk would be like John Henry Newman and realize, well, no, these are not really Catholic articles, and go over to Rome, as it was said. And Anglo-Catholicism would finally begin to not only bring back some of the words, the introits and the graduals and the secret prayers and the post-communion prayers and the like, but also bring back the settings for the words, the world of what's sometimes called smells and bells, the sort of things that cost Archbishop Laud his head. Was he beheaded or burned? I lose track of all the ways that English had come up with to get rid of the folks that they disagree with before they just cancel them. At least cancellation is kinder and gentler, I suppose. And it doesn't make martyrs, and that's a big advantage. But anyway, I digress. So, by the time of the turn of the century, the Anglo-Catholic movement had made it into this country, and it found a home in, of all strange places, Wisconsin, and with not only, as I've mentioned often, the Fond du Lac Circus, with the works of Bishop Charles Chapman Grafton, but Nashotah House Seminary, the Anglo-Catholic seminary in the American Episcopal Church. It has been my good pleasure to have met some of the grandchildren, so to speak, of Bishop Grafton, graduates of Nashotah House, who are engaged in a project, I think they are calling it, to recover the words of the Catholic understanding of Anglicanism, but also translating them for our times. Now, whether or not we really need those words translated for our times, I'm not entirely convinced. I mean, if I were a Roman Catholic, I'd be a fan of the Latin Mass, but it's too early to see exactly what will happen, I suppose, with their projects. And one of the more interesting folk among that group, who were sometimes called themselves Bernardillos, I think, is Ben Jefferies. Now, Ben is a man of York, but he now lives in Alabama and is the rector of a church there. But he is also the general editor for the Nashotah House Press. And one of the things that they are doing, how did I manage to do this to my book? I hate when I do that. Are classics of American Anglicanism, and I have alluded to, and will probably someday make a full video about my own debt to Bishop Grafton. And Ben is an amateur, well, yes, I think an amateur book binder, but also a rather professional book designer. He is the the person responsible for the lovely layout of the ACNA 2019 Book of Common Prayer, which I unfortunately don't even have a copy of right now. I gave my last one away recently, and I need to get more. And he also edited this lovely little book, which I recommend, hardly called A Hymnal of the Heart. I hadn't meant to make a pun there. And here are some of the other editors. I only of them know personally only Nathaniel, who wrote some of the hymns that are coming out, some of the settings for the canticles and psalms, and their bigger project that they're working on, which is the St. Bernard Breviary. And again, I had a copy of the first edition and gave it away when I thought I was dying. Silly me. I do a lot of silly things. But the new edition is coming out soon. And one of the things which I love about this project is that making a breviary is kind of a return to an understanding of the church not as an organization and patterned after the Roman legion or the king and his vassals, as bishops in the Church of England became sort of vassals to the king, but perhaps even an organization of the church as communities. I don't know that there will be very many monasteries that will use the forthcoming quite beautiful St. Bernard's Breviary, but there will probably be a lot of sort of third-order Bernardillos out there. And I should add, one of the things that I find most exciting about what Ben and his co-workers are doing is not only are they bringing back the words, the lost antiphons, for instance, of the Christian year, which give the Psalms a continually new meaning every time, every season, but they are bringing them back as words that are sung. If one goes to a traditional Christian liturgy in Ethiopia, in Syria, in the Orthodox Church, in the Roman Catholic Church before that thing happened, a Mass, Latin Mass, these are words that are sung. Come, let us sing unto the Lord. And this understanding of how words are most powerful is something that we tend to have lost in our modern silent reading. Okay, a dig at Protestantism and a rejoicing in Orthodoxy, and hate me if you like, but I think one of the worst things that has happened in Christian worship is pew Bibles. The idea that rather listening to the Word of God, which traditionally, of course, would have been chanted and is still chanted, we read along. And then one of the things which I love best about the Orthodox Church is that even the Creed is sung, and it is sung in a tune that is like a beautiful love ballad. We need to bring back singing. And I say I'm excited by this project, by this attempt to bring the wandering sheep of Israel, to use Ezekiel's metaphor, back into the light, to see the light, and it is good. Now, of course, anybody who is trying to retrieve what is lost in the church doesn't have an easy job of it, and Ben is part of the ACNA, and the ACNA is both growing and struggling at the same time. And I would be delighted to see them absolutely flourish. But I think it's important to recognize, on the one thing, of course, by your fruits you shall know them, but also by your efforts you shall know them. By the way that people work out their salvation. And I am delighted that there are folks in the church today who are working out their salvation by retrieving the gifts of the church that we often have just discarded. And this has been, to me, one of the really sad things about the church recently. I mean, I blame it on, I tend to focus a lot on Vatican II because that was such a watershed time. That Ben and his friends go to this effort, and it's not something that they get paid a lot for. I don't think they get paid anything for it, but to try to redig their father's wells, to retrieve these lost jewels of the church. I look at the modern church and I think it's like a miser. I had a miserly grandmother who hoarded diamonds and lived in poverty. If we are going to be able to share the gifts of grace that have been given to us in the sacraments of the church, then we are going to have to admit that they exist and celebrate them rather than denying them. Now, I think it's just one of the wonders of the modern world, really, that so much of the real tradition of what I call the big church has been preserved in Anglicanism, that it has remained a seedbed for a lot of new growth. But there's more. There's more. And people like Ben and, Lance Davis, for instance, who's producing a sort of office book that is not in modern language, eschews modern language, give me great hope for the future. As I say, even if monasteries don't break out all over North America that use the St. Bernard's breviary. Well, if someone wanted to open a new monastery in North America, Ben and the other Bernardillos are working on giving them a tool, and I'll put a link to the site for it below. I think it's going to go on sale maybe by the end of March or April. The preview copies are coming out in March, and I look forward to that effort to bring light on the flock of who wander so often in darkness. Well, I will be happy to hear your reactions and comments and likes or dislikes, and meanwhile, thanks for watching.